Hey everybody, Wandering Pastor out here for a nice walk on the grounds of Bear Lake Bible Camp in Jones, Michigan, down by Niles. They've graciously allowed me to come out here and use a room to pray and fast and spend some time just seeking the Lord for my own personal benefit and future direction and so on, and that's been really good. But it got me thinking about waiting on the Lord and about what do you do when you're waiting on the Lord and you have to keep waiting and nothing seems to change, and how do you know when to move forward or when to wait? How do you know what is going on, or have you stepped out of God's will and he's put you on the shelf or whatever? I've been dealing with that personally for a while, and this time has been really helpful in clarifying, and that's been good. But one of the things I did was I spent some time in the Word reading about people who have had to wait on the Lord. And in Genesis chapters 12 through 21, we read about Abram, who then became, of course, Abraham. And in chapter 12, he was called to leave his father's home and everything he had ever known and go to where God would show him. God didn't tell him where to go. He just said, I'll show you. And so Abram did that in chapter 12 when he was 75 years old. And again, I realized people lived longer back then, and so that some of the age ranges, it's like, wow, at 75, God calls him. But he did. Called him and promised him that he would make him into a great nation, and he would, through his wife Sarai, who then became Sarah, she would give birth to Isaac, and God would bless the peoples of the earth through Abraham and his offspring Isaac. Well, Abraham had to wait a long time for that to happen, and in the meantime, he had several missteps and several things that were just stupid ways that he was trying to help God out. And bottom line is, in Genesis chapter 21, is finally when Isaac is born. That's 25 years after God had called him and made that promise to him. And it made me think, wow, 25 years of waiting and wondering, oh, Lord, did you forget? Or Lord, what's up? Why is this taking so long? And that would have been hard to wait that long. And so, we look at Abraham's story, and we realize, man, you made some big mistakes. But it's hard to wait that long. And yet God did come through. The promise, the calling was real. He did come through, and he did do what he had said he would do. And we're all the better for it, because that, of course, is the line that the Messiah came through. And then you look in Genesis chapter 37 through 50, and that's one of my favorite stories in the scripture. It's the story of Joseph. And you read about Joseph, who at the age of 17 had these prophetic dreams that all of his 11 brothers and his parents would come and bow down to him. Now, he didn't know the context or how it would happen or why, but he did have those dreams, and they were prophetic. They were dreams from God. And Joseph, unfortunately, in an unwise way, proceeded to tell his brothers, and his brothers, who already didn't like him because he was his father's favorite, took it out on him, and they sold him as a slave in Genesis chapter 37, 38, something like that. And for years, he was a slave, and then he was imprisoned. God blessed him wherever he went, but even in the prison. But bottom line is, he was placed there as a slave and placed there against his will. Even though he had not done anything wrong, he was imprisoned for actually doing the right thing and standing up to Potiphar's wife. But Joseph was eventually let out of prison, interpreted a dream for Pharaoh, and put in charge of all of Egypt and all of that land. And through really bad circumstances, Joseph was on the throne. And sure enough, his brothers had to come to him and bow down to him, and his father did too, and receive food and everything from Joseph. And Joseph realized that God sovereignly had placed him there before his brothers in order to spare the whole family. And Joseph trusted him. Now, that was 13 years later. So Joseph had the dreams at the age of 70. He became Pharaoh's right-hand man at the age of 30. 13 years he had waited. That's a long time. Again, another example, David, one of my favorite Bible characters, King David. He was in 1 Samuel, I believe it was 15, he was anointed by Samuel to be the next king of Israel. Now, Saul was still on the throne, but David was anointed by God, who was a man after God's heart, and God knew it, and anointed David to become that man, that king. And David faithfully served Saul. He went into the army. He played the harp for Saul to help him when he was having a hard day. And despite that, Saul turned on David because Saul became jealous of David. He turned on David, tried to kill him a few times. David let Saul go when he had him in his hands a couple different times. And yet it wasn't until 2 Samuel chapter 5, this was 12 to 15 years later, that David was finally installed as king over Israel. And so again, you're left with a situation where God might call you and then spend a fair amount of time, maybe years, before that calling comes to fruition. Now, a couple of things we need to do. We need to make sure we're not putting words in God's mouth. We need to pray and seek the Lord and look at His Word and make sure that we're not trying to make something, sound like it was from Him when it wasn't. We need to humbly submit to His leadership. But then ultimately, we need to humble ourselves and pray and seek His face constantly. And we need to be faithful in serving where He has us right now, even if the dream is for something else later, that He's using the time right now, right where you are, right now, to teach you, to refine you, to transform you, so that when the day comes, you're able to use it, and you're able to see it, and you're able to function the way you should in the midst of that situation. Now, I don't know what you're going through. I don't know if you're facing any battle in your mind like that. But I know for myself that I need to make sure that I'm waiting on the Lord, that I need to make sure that I'm being faithful where He has me right now, so that I'm ready if the dream that I have ever comes to fruition. And in the meantime, I need to trust Him, because what if I'm wrong? What if He never intended to do what I thought He was going to do? And in the meantime, He just has me doing my thing, like these things. What if that's okay? That's got to be okay, because that's what He's called me to do for right now. And so I encourage you, be faithful where you're at right now. Trust Him, pray, seek His face always, seek to grow in Him always, but ultimately trust Him that He knows the right timing, He knows the right path, He knows the circumstances, He knows He's sovereignly working in your life and through you and all of that. And in the meantime, be faithful to what He's called you to do right now. That's how you prepare for the future. No matter what your dream is, no matter what you think the big call might be, He's working. Trust Him. Be faithful. Let Him lead. That's the best thing to do, okay? Wandering Pastor saying peace. I hope you have a great day and that you might be faithfully serving the Lord today. Thanks.